Kazakhstan is an utterly fascinating country, yet most people can't even put it on the map where I live in the UK, and I suspect the same is true of the United States, Australia, New Zealand and much of the rest of the world. It's the size of the whole of Western Europe. It borders Russia, China, and it's very close to all of the rest of the stans: Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan. It's very close to Iraq and Iran. It's strategically placed, it has a stable government, and it's becoming a very attractive place for investors. If we look at the opinion of the government itself about economic growth for the future, they're very upbeat. The president of Kazakhstan said in February 2005 that he was expecting to see GDP per capita raised to around $5,800 per year by 2010, which is around the current level of countries like the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland and Malaysia. By 2015, the government is expecting that to rise to around $9,000 per person per year. Now, at the moment, this is a poor country. It has been a very poor country. In fact, after the collapse of the Soviet bloc, conditions went from bad to worse in much of Kazakhstan. So where is this confidence coming from? Well, the answer is simple. It's from oil and gas, from coal, from copper, from magnesium, uranium and just about every other kind of metal which is in Kazakhstan in relative abundance. But in that abundance of mineral resources lies a huge challenge. A recent UN study showed that countries that are mineral rich, on the whole, tended to have a lower GDP growth than some of their less well-endowed neighbours. That might seem surprising, but one of the reasons is because as mineral wealth is exploited, the currency starts to become more valuable. As that happens, it becomes more and more difficult for other companies and organizations inside a country to export their products, and the rest of the economy becomes more and more focused on these big engines of growth. And Kazakhstan certainly faces some of those challenges. Nevertheless, it is a very attractive market right now for multinationals with huge growth prospects for the future. So what about the population of Kazakhstan? Well, the first thing we're going to see is further migration from the rural, poorest areas into the cities where the money is and the businesses are thriving. At the same time, we're going to see continued question marks about the birth rate. Now, the birth rate is higher than its neighboring Russia, which is just as well. In Russia, it's a disastrously low 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 babies per couple. Well, we all know that we need around 2.4 babies per couple just to keep a population stable. That means that in many parts of Russia, we need 8 great-grandparents to produce a single great-grandchild, which is an unsustainable situation in the long term. You either have to make babies or you have to import them, and Russia shows little sign of doing either on a large scale at the moment. In contrast, Kazakhstan has a relatively young population with just around 1.8, 1.9 babies per couple, and it seems to be rising, perhaps reflecting the new economic confidence in the country. We are also seeing significant numbers of Kazakh population coming home. At the same time, we're seeing quite a lot of Russians leaving. Now, in fact, we can expect the Kazakh population of 11 million to increase by more than 1 million people every 5 years. Perhaps we'll see it top more than 20 million people by 2030. Of course, that's a long way away, and we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, we're seeing education rise, skills rise, and we are seeing a great engine for growth, not just in terms of mineral resources, but also in terms of intellectual capital. To be specific, if we look at the actual figures for those coming and going, just in 2004 alone, we saw 44,300 Kazakhs actually registered as returning from other countries. Now, many of them were bringing back university degrees from elsewhere, business skills, and the rest. 26,000 left of Russians, and when you balance those two together, you can see that there's quite a big change taking place in the population. Now, in terms of healthcare and education, the Kazakhs have still quite a long way to go to reach the expectations that they have for themselves and their children. It's still low in terms of spending compared to 1990s. It's low as a percentage of GDP compared to other emerging nations. Indeed, 1 in 5 30-year-old men are not expected to live beyond the age of 50 on current trends, although we can expect this to improve. There have been recent questions raised about safety in industries such as mining, with some large multinational companies coming under attack for supposedly having less regard for safety than the Russian administration had when they dominated the future of Kazakhstan in the late 1980s. Life expectancy as a whole is still lower than it was in 1987, but you can expect a lot of that to change, as I say, as economic growth expands government revenues. And as that happens, we will expect greater attention on some of the other challenges that Kazakhstan faces. Here is a country of spectacular beauty. It is one of the most hospitable and friendly countries that I have ever had the privilege to visit. And yet, it's one of the countries which has been hardest hit by environmental challenges and disasters. The Soviets, during the Russian years, Russian-dominated years of Kazakhstan, exploded over 400 nuclear warheads in Kazakh's territory. And most of them were underground, but some of them were in the air. And some of them, unfortunately, were done in such a way as to deliberately expose part of the local population. And the scars are still there in people's bodies, but also in terms of environmental damage. And then we have the challenge of the Aral Sea, which was sucked dry as a result of over-irrigation and is slowly recovering. So here is a country with huge natural resources, a government which is acutely aware of its heritage and its obligation to future generations, a country with massive natural resources, a country attracting large amounts of financial support in foreign investment, but also intellectual capital. Very talented people are moving into the country. So, in summary then, an exciting future. Many countries have yet to even discover where this great country of Kazakhstan is, but it does have an important regional location, and with its huge resources, economic growth, low costs and stable government, we can expect further rapid development.